podcast of the week, but not one that you wanted to miss. We've got a great guest for you. Erich Parker is a seasoned marketer and leader who currently serves as the SVP of Integrated Media at Blue Chip Worldwide. Based in Chicago, he's a key driver of the agency's media strategy, specializing in bridging the gap between storytelling and transactional shopper marketing. Erich spent over a decade rising through the ranks at Blue Chip. He began as an account supervisor in shopper marketing and progressed through leadership roles, including VP of Client Leadership and VP of Integrated Media before his current SVP position. He's known for building media plans that drive commerce, ensuring that big creative ideas translate into measurable success at the point of sale. He holds an MBA in marketing management and strategy and planning from DePaul Dryhouse College of Business and in marketing from Central Michigan University. Erich, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate you spending some time with the audience and talking about the ever expanding world of shopper media, retail media, what do they call it? Commerce media. Feels like 1998 all feels like the World Wide Web again. We've got all everybody that's got consumer data is now a retail media network or a shopper media network. Right?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, Wild West all over again every day. It's a new frontier. So yeah, a lot of changes in the landscape, partners, data, AI, of course, is in every conversation. So yeah, it's an exciting, intense time for sure.
Let's go. All right. Well, we'll dive into all of the latest and greatest around your world and the areas of the media industry that you guys serve. But maybe let's start a little bit with the beginning. So I ran through your bio a little bit there. Sounds like you've had a longer tenure with the agency than a lot of people, sticking around for a minute. So Tell us a little bit about where you grew up. What'd you study when you were at Central Michigan? And what got you excited about the agency world?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a really small town in Michigan, about 2 hours north of Detroit, on a farm, kind of rural area. But quickly, got out of there when I went off to college at Central Michigan, still kind of rural, but moved on. I studied retail marketing at Central Michigan at the time. I had dreams of owning my own guitar shop, and I thought retail marketing, that was going to be the way I was going to do it and make it easy, and I was going to learn everything I need to know. I quickly learned that being a small retail owner comes with a ton of hours and a lot of weekends and no vacations, and I rethought my career from there. So I didn't quite fulfill on that dream, but I learned a lot about just consumer behavior in the retail world and how people shop for everyday categories and around the grocery store, and that's really served me well in my time here at Blue Chip. From Central Michigan, I moved to Chicago, and I came in 2006, got a job with careerbuilder.com back when .coms were a thing, and job boards were, a little bit more popular and useful. And it was kind of in a sales role there, and I spent about 18 months, and that was a fast-paced, quick churn environment. So at 18 months, I was kind of a veteran of the industry and veteran of the organization. But I always kind of just had this draw. I couldn't even really put my finger on why, but this desire to be in the agency world. And I was lucky enough to get a gig at Havas. At the time, it was Euro RSCG, and it was going through all of its iterations of being bought up and buying all the tiny little agencies around the U.S. And I worked for an event marketing or experiential marketing arm that did a lot of life stage and experiential marketing. And I spent about 6 years there. Really was great. Learned a lot. Got to work with a lot of great brands, Reckitt Benckiser and Procter & Gamble, MTV. So that was a lot of fun, a lot of exciting opportunities to travel the country and, put on experiential events. And At the time, I was starting to learn about this, this idea of shopper marketing. Customer marketing has been a thing for a really long time, or retail marketing been around for a really long time, but kind of this new idea of, honing in on the shopper and marketing to a shopper mindset. And a lot of the work we were doing at Havas was starting to interact with the shopper. How can we engage with that shopper right before they make a shopping trip, whether that be at the doctor's office or in the parking lot at a Walmart, right? So a lot of different areas along that path to purchase that we can engage that shopper. And as that was happening, a colleague of mine at Havas moved on to Blue Chip, and I was able to make a connection there. And I met my boss, Jamie, who's now our president. She was kind of leading the charge at Blue Chip, who has over 40 years of experience in customer retail shopper marketing, but she was kind of taking this new approach to shopper marketing and this shopper centric. And she asked me to join the team, and she and I kind of acted as like a 2-person hit team, kind of going around the agency and working with brands to help them gain new distribution, build spec plans for gaining that distribution, and really kind of started to revolutionize that. We gained a few clients through BD, and I got assigned those accounts. So kind of became more like a client leadership, client service role naturally, which was something that kind of came naturally to me. I really like people, really like building relationships. So that was really great, and also afforded me the opportunity to kind of lead strategy for all of my accounts, working with strategic planners and media planners and creative directors, and kind of had my hand kind of orchestrating the whole ecosystem, if you will, at the agency. So it's
Very
been
cool.
that, and kind of dabbled in all the different types of media you can think of, executing in everything from TV to e-commerce. And when the role opened up here at Blue Chip for integrated media lead, I was talking with Jamie, and I just said, hey, I feel like I can bring more to the agency and work across more clients in a different role. And she gave me the opportunity and believed that I could lead this team. And that's been going for a little over 5 years now. So
let's go.
Years total at Blue Chip. So it's been great.
Love it. Did you ever get to, I'm curious, was the music store inspiration? Were you a musician growing up? Is that kind of the fascination there?
Yeah, I started playing guitar. I remember it really vividly. Actually, I was 7 years old, Christmas morning, and I got guitar and guitar lessons, and I did that for like, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, going and getting having the lessons. And you think I'd be better player after taking the lessons for so long, but it's just more of like a personal thing. But I just loved hanging out at guitar shops and checking out the gear, watching how much fun people had, enjoying the instruments. And so for a minute there, I thought that was maybe the path that I was going to take, but there was other plans for me, I think.
Did that world ever reemerge from you through clients like Guitar Center? Or, the reason I ask is my good friend Dustin Hines was the head of marketing at Guitar Center for 16 years, and he went on to Ernie Ball Strings, and he's now at Firestone Walker. But just a fascinating, space, like the marketing of musical instruments. Yeah. And I'm lucky enough to be here in Southern California, so we have this little thing called the NAMM show, right up about an hour drive up the coast, and it's put on by the National Association of Music Makers, which actually is headquartered here in San Diego in Carlsbad, right next to Legoland. They actually have their museum, which is really cool, and they've always got like really cool, like they'll have like the drummer for some huge band, or like people that play instruments for these massive bands, and they do these really cool concerts there. But the NAMM show is massive. I think it might be like one of the top 10 shows in the world each year from a retailer show perspective. Like so much money is spent and made on the marketing of instruments. How like of the people who are hobbyists and
Right.
people who play in their local church band and gig on the weekends and stuff like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, no music instruments as clients. However, my very first day at Havas, I reported to the airport to fly to a production set as we were preparing to help launch the MTV Rock Band video game. So we put together a massive nationwide tour that was hitting college campuses and retail environments, promoting the game, and with a giant 53-foot trailer that the side folded down to become a music stage, and you got to go back behind, practice playing the instruments, demo the game, and then with a full-on soundboard, you give people opportunity to kind of be a rock band or rock hero up on stage in that parking lot or that tailgate. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, no, I've always wanted to work with like a Gibson or a Fender. I feel like that would be like awesome, but yeah, not yet. Maybe someday.
Not yet. Someday. Well, hey, we just came off of trying to connect at Shop Talk. We missed each other, unfortunately, this year, but we were able to connect after the fact. But it's my 5th Shop Talk. I think, my kind of 2 key insights coming out of it were, one, now like if the year before the buzzword or the keyword was AI, this year it feels like it was agentic. Everything you have to be able to talk to your data and talk to your tool sets and be data ready and all this kind of fun stuff that consultants create to sell consulting gigs. But I'd be curious, from your perspective as an agency leader, kind of navigating the Shop Talk show, meeting with vendors, meeting with brands, et cetera. Were there some key takeaways for you that you brought back to the team and you guys are trying to implement?
Yeah, I think it reinforced a lot of things for me and for our agency. Like AI's table stakes, we have to be embracing it and using it to empower decision making. And I think that's one of the things that we do really well is just getting to insights and being able to make the right decisions. And that's where AI comes in, is the advantage to kind of allow you to analyze the data more quickly so that you can be informed and make the right decisions. And for me, even I think it was the Macy's keynote, they were talking about the customer connection. And what was really clear to me in that and a couple of other conversations and presentations was the human connection is always going to be something that people want, right? So, as marketers, we have to, yes, use chat agents to try to interact with the data and draw conclusions and come up with insights. But it's the decisions that we make from a human standpoint and keeping the human centric in everything we do is what's really important. And for me, I think empathy and having that consumer insight and that human centric thought and cultural thought, right, is really what is at the forefront of his successful marketing. But you got to use the AI to synthesize all that data. The fragmentation is incredible, right? You have to have the tools to help you get out there into the marketplace with as fast as everything's moving.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the idea of human centric. I have a case study of 2 mature beyond their years, 10 and 12-year-olds girls. And, one of them has close to 40,000 subscribers on Instagram already. She's not even supposed to be on the app. They love the mall. It's like every day it's like, Dad, can we go to the mall? Like they want to get dropped off with their friends at the mall and they want to go around and go to stores and try things on. And, it feels like, we're kind of inevitable push to more and more online retail, brought on by COVID. I think it feels like the younger generation or this Gen Alpha they really like the human shopping. I think it's more parasocial than it is like, the idea of like they actually want to go in and, have that experience. I think it's more about friends and be able to like create content and have a place to congregate. I wonder how that's showing up in the data that you guys are seeing. Is e-commerce just still, a tear in the focus, or is brick and mortar retail still important or as important? Where do you think the scales are right now in brick and mortar versus online and delivery, or the hybrid?
Yeah. Obviously, COVID was a huge driver of e-commerce. Changing consumer behaviors, getting everything at the click of a button, and sometimes in minutes. But yeah, I mean, 85 to 90% of all CPG purchases are still made in a brick and mortar environment. So you have to you still definitely have to win in e-commerce. You have to be present, but you have to take this. You have to take this is kind of an older thought, but you have to have that omni-channel thought. But it's not because of like being everywhere. It's where it's important for that consumer, and allowing commerce to kind of happen on their terms. Today, I need this item really fast. I'm going to order from GoPuff. Tomorrow, I'm building a list for my stock up trip at Walmart or Kroger. And, during the week, oh shoot, I forgot I needed something, but I don't really need it until the weekend. I'll Amazon it, right? Like there's just this environment where consumers and shoppers aren't just doing all their, they're not just doing all their shopping in one channel. Right. And they have different trip missions. They have different need states and urgencies that really influence that. So yes, PDP content is extremely important. Making sure that you're showing up properly on a retailer site, or that you're showing up properly for SEO, super important. But the brick and mortar is not going away. And I think we've seen that with some of the new kind of advances in retail media networks. So retail media networks have obviously been very centric on their own websites, search, display. Some of the more sophisticated ones moving more towards offsite display, et cetera. But more and more, they're trying to vie for your attention in store. So how do I get a video display in the grocery aisle and make it dynamic? How can I make it so it's maybe feeding off of demographic cues of the individual walking down the aisle, or pinging off a cell phone, or just really being able to rotate messages, right? And but retailers still want to be able to control that message as well, and in that environment, that shopping environment. So they're going to do it on their own terms and build that out themselves. Where in the past you might have seen third-party partners putting static signage on carts or in aisle. They're going to start to build this capability out for themselves and use different signals that they have with their first-party shopper data to engage maybe more on a little bit more personal level in store.
Yeah, I think about my wife's chief household officers, kind of like grocery habits. Like she goes to Trader Joe's, multiple times per week.
Right.
Just like, a few things here, a few things there. Then usually like Costco once or twice a week for like the bulk orders. And then it's like Walmart.com for like the emergency, right? It's like, oh, we're out of creamer. Well, they'll be here in 10 minutes if we order $25 worth of stuff. And we'll throw some bananas and some things that we just to pump up the order. Oh, we're out of non-alcoholic beer, and we want to hang out and have a nice evening on a Friday night or a Saturday or something like that.
Right.
This is not completely, well, I don't know. Have you ever seen, are you aware of this Trader Joe's seasonal bag as like a fashion accessory? Are you aware of this trend?
I have heard of it. I'm not as familiar. Yeah.
So you have these. So Trader Joe's went kind of, they were early to the sustainability, model. Like I'd always gave you some type of incentive to carry the Trader Joe's kind of like cloth totes, the reusable totes.
Yeah.
And then this last season, they launched them in like red and green and pink, and they like every holiday they shift the colors, and it's like my wife and my girls go there like just to get these totes to like carry around as purses. Like we've seen kind of like unexplainable fashion trends with like items that like I don't know, like Stanley Cup I think is a great example. Like Stanley for a long time was like that was the construction workers' thermos that they took to the job site, and they, kept some warm soup in there for cold days, or like the coffee thermos for reusable coffee. And then they blew up as like this, like kind of, Yeti competitor, but have you ever seen like a retailer have like like a moment like this Trader Joe's bag where the brand actually becomes like a fashion accessory?
I can't think of another retailer, situation. I mean, Target, maybe.
Yeah, Target definitely at a point had kind of the, what do you call, like the Targetista, or I don't know, like the kind of like, it was more like the shopper, like Target private label brand. I feel like even like with clothing and stuff like that became really posh for like trendy for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know too much about the Trader Joe, but what it strikes me is that Trader, this is their way. This is your wife and your girls, and anyone else who's infatuated with this as a fashion. It's their way of, and as I'm saying this, I'm thinking actually yes, QSR, Starbucks, just walking around with a cup. It's not a reusable, right? Or maybe you buy the reusable one, but it's all about portraying some sort of symbol, right? This is I have an affinity towards Trader Joe's because of maybe their values, what they stand for, the reason, the sustainability behind the bag in the first place. And now it just gives me more, they're tapping into that as a retailer saying, and as a brand, and saying, well, we just make this a little more interesting. Now people are you're gonna use it for more than just your groceries, right? And you're gonna be able to convey my status, or my affinity towards Trader Joe's because of what they stand for. That's me. That's who I am. So it's that personification of the brand and the a human connection that's being made there.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so you've been around in retail media long enough to see some pretty seismic shifts in shopper marketing. We talked about a few of them, but for a long time it felt like your job as a CPG brand was to build demand out in the world, so that would then drive foot traffic into the retailer, but it wasn't necessarily like always favored to a particular retailer. I mean, there's obviously things you can do like run in-store promotions and do couponing, and now, like, even in recent times, you could send influencers to a store to buy a product and then tag that retailer in the post and let their followers not just know that they were buying a particular product, but they were buying it at a particular retailer, and give them that association of why they could go in there. But now with the proliferation of retail and commerce media networks, it almost feels like everything is moving kind of to this pay-to-play model, where, if you want shelf space, if you want to be in, certain positions of like even get POs, really, like you have to kind of play the game, so to speak. Do you feel like the entire kind of brick and mortar retail ecosystem is kind of moving to a pay to play model?
I do, in a lot of sense. Sometimes they disguise it in a term they like to use, like joint business planning, or having a JV. But really, it's just how much are you going to spend in my media network in exchange for an end cap for 4 weeks, or demo event approval, or a new sign that's going to show up on shelf next to your product for a cycle. So we represent a lot of challenger brands. We work with a lot of huge brands, and they are still large, but they're a lot of times considered to be challenger brands, and they feel I think in a lot of situations pushed around. the retailer is demanding, we toss around the word ransom a little bit, kind of holding them hostage a little bit about, like, yeah, if you want this shelf space or you want another facing, we're going to need to see, a 50% increase. It's like, well, I'm not going to see a 50% increase in my sales by adding that SKU, or, so it is becoming, yes, a pay to play. It is incumbent upon the retailer to start being able to show and demonstrate the value that that's bringing. And I think some of them are coming along for the way and trying to figure out, incrementality studies and methodologies and building out new opportunities, providing data, transparency, allowing for, marketers and agencies to leverage the data to activate in the channels they so wish, and glean learnings from activating with that data. And others, still it's a margin game. It's a way to kind of boost that profitability of that brand at that retailer. And maybe it's instead of a slotting fee, right, that maybe they would have been paying in years past. So yeah, I think there's still some of that. I think you can have really valuable JBPs when there is good transparency, good dialogue, and a good opportunity for the retailer to want the brand to allow to like grow the category and be able to give them the tools and the information that the brand can use to kind of make both boats rise, if you will.
Do brands have to be more careful in their retailer planning strategy as they roll out to new retailers? It seems like there was a time where it was just like, get as many doors as possible, get products into as many locations as possible, and expand your national distribution and then your global distribution. Do you think you have to be more calculated in your retail rollout, knowing that you're going to need to make some investments in these platforms as you start to grab shelf space?
Yeah, absolutely. We have conversations with our clients all the time around, if they're going to get increased distribution, how are we going to support that? They when they get on shelf, they have to show immediate turn, that those velocities have to hit a certain number in a very short period of time. Otherwise, they're going to get DQ'd. And so to do that, a lot of times it comes with product promotion or retail media network investments, which can sometimes play out in an end cap or a pallet drop or something that's going to add more visibility in store for that product to really move. But I think you have to support it. Anytime you're going to be increasing and trying to get more and more individuals, more household penetration, more distribution, you have to increase that marketing budget to support it, for sure. And RMNs is definitely and retailer media networks are really where we have to focus a lot of our attention, especially with like new distribution.
How does that complicate your life as a media planner and a media buyer? Because my understanding, at least at the moment, retail media or commerce media is not, one-to-one programmatic. It's not like you go to the trade desk or something like that, and you can basically go across the entire open web with ads and interactive and creative and video. Like a lot of these retail media networks are self-serve or direct insertion. So is it hard as a media planner to have to think about, creating an IO essentially with each of these individual RTMs versus being able to have like one uniform, buying terminal the way that you do with programmatic across traditional publishers? And do you think that will change? Do you think there will be standardization? I mean, probably you won't ever see it with like an Amazon maybe, but even maybe an Amazon would participate in like a long tail remnant inventory, type of arrangement if there was, like an exchange to bolt into essentially.
Short answer, yes, it's extremely complex. Writing individual IOs to managed service partners, writing them to maybe even competitive agencies that have, direct relationships or exclusive relationships with a retailer to run their programmatic display or their on-site display. So Yeah, there's a lot of complexity there, and it comes through, yes, activation, prioritization. The number of phone calls that we get from retail media networks when they know that we represent a brand. Hey, you spent X with us last year. Want to get talking about how much you're going to spend with us this year? Having a conversation with a retailer when you don't actually control like that a lot of times that conversation happens between the sales team and the buyer, or the brand and the buyer, the merchant, right? Talking about what their distribution business looks like, what the JBPs look like. And, sometimes we have to say, yeah, you didn't make the budget this year, right? You didn't get slotted in. I'm sorry, we have to prioritize somewhere else. And then, adding to the complexity is that there's no uniform way of measuring it, and the IAB is working on standardizing a lot of that right now across commerce marketing channels. But it's going to take a lot of adoption. There's, some platforms you still can't tag the way that you would want to tag in an open web for transparency and tracking for delivery. Different sales and incrementality methodologies or ROAS methodologies, different look back windows. So it's like really hard to just kind of even everything out across the board when there's so many individual walled gardens. We already had a problem with open web versus social versus Google versus, and now you're adding in walled gardens within walled gardens. They're buying the same DSP that I'm buying, but I still can't see it because, I have to run an IO, so those are some of the situations that we run into.
Yeah, that's wild. All right, let's talk. You started to talk a little bit about the interior of the store becoming more and more of a tapestry for digital. The same way that the outdoor industry has digitized boards and more of them all the time, and more opportunities to serve creative dynamically in the real world. That is coming to the floor of retailers, whether that's end caps on your shopping cart, things that you can scan, refrigerator windows that are actually screens. A lot of cool things. A lot of cool things happening on the innovation side. But I wonder, have you seen any research around how the consumer thinks about the user experience? Do they feel like they're walking into a Las Vegas casino floor? Or do you feel like they feel like this technology, at least at this point, is adding value to the shopper experience? Or do they feel, like they're walking into like a flashing strobe light, something like you look at certain grocery stores and they appeal to a more affluent audience, and they tend to actually feel a little bit more like old school farmers markety, kind of like, you think of like maybe like a Sprouts or something like that. Like it almost feels more, more agrarian in some ways, to kind of give that feel of like, this is organic, this is natural, this is not a, this is not a space where science is in every, corner of your food, distribution. And is there any thought around, that and, the consumer experience and the trade-offs there?
Yeah, a couple things. So I think first, like, retailers do know their shoppers, right? They know their shoppers really well, right? And so when I said earlier that they're going to want to control the environment, there's going to be certain retailers who are wanting to provide that sort of Sprouts shopping experience or the clean store policy, because that's what their consumers want, their shoppers want, and that's the kind of the connection that they've made with those individuals. So the approach that we take when we are building out media plans that are across multiple retailers, we look, our strategic insights team and our media planners do an amazing job of looking at how a shopper interacts with the category, but how do they interact with that retailer, and how does that vary? So person X shops at Walmart, person Y shops at Dollar General, just to throw something that's completely different, right? Like those are completely different shopping experiences, different trip missions, different demands and needs that shopper has. And so that retailer knows it, and those are different behaviors. They interact with that shopper or that retailer in a much different way. And so we look at their media consumption behaviors, because they're different individuals. Going back to being human centric, like they're all different. Add in the layer that the trip mission changes too. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and you said your wife does this too, right? Like you shop one retailer at one moment and you go to another one for something different. And I might be a Coca-Cola buyer, and when I buy it at 7-Eleven, I'm buying it different than I'm buying it at Walmart, and different frequency, different formats, different price points, right? And there's different ways that I can communicate to that person via 7-Eleven versus Walmart, and they're shopping in a different way. So I need to get on the larger pantry loading shopping list for the Walmart trip, but I need to somehow drive impulse or like immediate consumption in a 7-Eleven environment. So that's how we kind of like view that. And so getting back to, how those different experiences come to life in those different retailers, it's all about that shopper and what that person is looking for and how they're appealing to that aesthetic. So Jewel down the street is going to have a lot of signage, but the Trader Joe's is going to be a completely different experience.
Yeah. One of the most impactful keynotes I heard this year was at IAB in Palm Desert. It was the gentleman's name is Zach. I forget his last name, but he was the original go-to-market guy for ChatGPT, and he's out there on the keynote circuit talking a lot about, AI, of course, because he had a front row seat at, one of the biggest companies in their rollout of, marketing the first consumer AI platform. He talks a lot about bots, marketing to bots. And, I've given a lot of thought around this from the B2B context. Like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, some company a lot of companies have a hard time telling their story anyway. So why wouldn't it make sense if like a bot could say, oh, I do this. And then there's a buyer over here and it says, I need this. And then it somehow just finds itself in the middle with salespeople less involved. But when you get down to the consumer level, he talked about the idea of we're going to have agentic personal shoppers. It's going to be something that happens for fashion. It's going to be something that probably happens for travel at some point. But he predicted that the first agents that we will trust as consumers will be grocery. Reason being is that it's the thing that we buy commodities the most, and we sometimes don't realize it, right? So, I've got coffee and milk and cheese and all this different stuff in the grocery store. And the way that Zach broke it down was there's really only 6 brands in his refrigerator and in his cupboard and in his freezer that he cares what brand it is. All the rest of them, he could care less as long as he walked to his refrigerator and it was always full. And the smart refrigerator took a picture every day and then talked to Amazon or Walmart, whoever, and made sure that anytime he was low or out, that was always just on his doorstep. What do you think about a world in which our devices start making the orders for us, or our devices start communicating with our agents? And do you agree that CPG and food, because we need to eat it every single day, whether it's, food's probably a part of the category, but when you get into soap and hair care and I think skincare starts to go in another direction, but hygiene products, probably Q-tips, basically anything that's a commodity, you probably at some point are not going to maybe care what brand it is. So I wonder if you're thinking about what the world looks like when these agents start doing a good portion of our commodity buying.
Yeah, scary to think about, for sure. I think one of the reasons why it's grocery, right, is it tends to be a low involvement, right? Where I'm not going to use it to buy my car. I'm not going to use it to, make any major decisions for me. But yeah, things on repeat, subscribe and save has been a thing for a while. I was reading an article, hopefully I don't recall the author this morning, but talking about Rufus and how that was, how that is, just knows so much about us and our habits and our person, like even who's in our household, right? I think what the implications are for brands is that you have to spend more effort on becoming that brand and making that connection. Because if there's only 6 brands in your buddies or the keynote, if there's only 6 brands in your refrigerator and your pantry that you really care about, all those other brands do become commodities. They're no longer brands. They're products on a shelf, and so it's more and more important for brands to spend time ingratiating themselves into the lives of those individuals and those consumers, so that you do care. You choose it with you choose it with purpose. It makes it in the refrigerator a couple times, and now it's taking that picture, and it's always going to be Coke. It's always going to be the Starbucks coffee. It's so I think that that's why the brand is always so important, and that's something that we feel very strongly at Blue Chip. Being in commerce marketing, you might think that we're very performance centric, and yes, that is important. You have to sell the brand. You have to sell today. You have to sell tomorrow. You have to keep selling to keep the lights on. But for that future demand, for you to protect yourself from commodity situations, price pressures, private label price increases, whatever, you have to have a purpose and a connection with that person as a brand. And so we feel it's really important that you're constantly, everything you do builds upon that equity for the brand, even in a selling moment. And so that's kind of like what we call the brand commerce approach to that we're doing. So it's all about leveraging what equities you do have, bringing that full funnel through the line, and communicating that, justifying that price, demonstrating the value, and getting in the refrigerator and the pantry on a recurring basis, not just because the price is right or the agent thought of it.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I could see myself, saying, okay, I like this particular brand of yogurt, but for cheese, optimize for the cheapest, biggest cheddar I can get, right? And then you're just getting it, and then you probably are fine until you get something you don't like, and then you're like, well, actually, change the cheese to Tillamook.
Change that. Don't do that.
Right? Yeah. Yep. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited because I do agree with him. I think things that we would consider commodities or everyday purchases or staples, those are going to be the ones we are willing to let the agents play with. I think at first, and then I don't know. Like if you ever told me that I would have bought my last four cars from an online delivery service, I would have told you were crazy, and that's what I'm doing now. So,
well, what made you think about buying those cars through the?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I think it's really important. And I hate that I have to murder Toyota every time I tell this story, but it's it's their fault, unfortunately. So, my wife literally had the cash in the bank to go to Toyota and buy a Prius for cash. The salesman asked her if her husband needed to be there to make the decision. She was so put off by that kind of sexist remark that she went back and found this app called Carvana, and she ordered the car through Carvana, sold the old car through Carvana, got a new Subaru, then sold her Subaru through another app called Vroom, and then bought her Tesla off Carvana. And last time I bought a truck, I told her, I said, you know what? My first truck was cool. I had a Cadillac Escalade EXT. But I said, you know what? The next truck, I don't really care as long as it's 4x4 diesel and white. I wanted it white because I don't like washing it a lot. And,
yeah, right.
I told her, I said, I don't even want to know what it is. I just want to show up and be surprised. And I showed up and I had a new Dodge Ram, or not a new, lightly used Dodge Ram, and yeah, I've been pretty happy with it. So
yeah, so that's interesting. That was a very much like an attribute purchase, right?
Yeah,
versus like a brand purchase. And I don't know anything about your wife's car affinities, but it sounds like maybe Subaru and some Tesla, like they were probably purchased based on some more of like a brand emotional connection, and Carvana or Vroom didn't have anything to do with it, right? It was just like Toyota
they were
just turned
just
her off.
Yeah, Toyota turned her off, and it was more about the experience, right? Like the experience to not walk on a car lot and play the dance, just to have a straightforward something that felt as close to e-commerce as possible, which is what Carvana and these other companies give you now.
Yeah.
So
Right. But in that situation, like the reliance upon the brand is extremely important. If you're not going in and like taking a test drive, sitting in it, she was relying upon the brand reputation in a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right. Blue Chip's a member of Worldwide Partners. You guys are independent. How do you feel like independence gives you a strategic edge over maybe your competitors that don't claim independence?
Yeah, I think we are extremely agile, and we can move at the speed that our clients need us to make adjustments that are right for them and our relationships versus maybe the stakeholders or shareholders of a holdco. So we're more so I feel like agnostic agents for our clients than maybe some of the others who may be beholden to specific DSP relationships or data that they might have to employ because it's part of the holdco and the supply chain. So I think that's our advantage. We can actually choose the best options that are out there for our clients rather than being beholden to what's on the balance sheet.
Yeah, I love that. I think the retailer experience is just so important to the consumer. I think about that automotive example, literally could totally changed the consumer behavior of my family forever in the peak of our earning potential, where we would be buying the most expensive cars moving forward, But then also like the retail experience of like, one of the things I used to absolutely love, and I was a sales associate at Office Max selling electronics. So I feel like maybe that's why, but like that was my first job in high school, 17 years old on the showroom floor of Office Max, helping people figure out what computer to buy and why, or what fax machine to pick, or even what cell phone, clam shaped star phone, cell phone to pick before smartphones. But, one of the things I used to love was to go to Best Buy and just be like, hey, I need a new microphone for my podcast. Tell me about this one or tell me about that one. What do you think? Like, to have that trusted expert. And I feel like, man, I've just been disappointed the last 2 or 3 times that I kind of, went into a retailer to get that expertise. How important is it, and how much do you guys spend time with the client thinking about the fact that your touch with a retail associate is maybe the most important impression that they will receive in the retailer experience? You can see all these great ads, you can see all this great marketing, but then if you show up to the store and the human to human connection that you, circling back to what you said at the very beginning of the show, like these self-checkout cards, some people think they're convenient. I hate it. I'm like, why are you making me do the work? I didn't sign up to bag groceries and to scan items. I wanted to dump them on a conveyor belt.
You do it wrong, and then you have to wait for somebody to come over and fix it, or you put it in the wrong spot.
So how much do you think automation and just lack of maybe consumer and product knowledge, or just a frontline sales force who feels like they are as invested in the brand as the shopper, how important is that? And how can, because you as an agency can do everything right, but then if the retailer doesn't have that frontline person that gives that meets the brand promise in the retail environment, it can drive permanent negative consequences.
Yeah. I think, in the grocery setting, maybe a little less important, but in, something that's maybe a little bit more involved, that, you're maybe in the home improvement channel where you need to get some product education. You got to educate that frontline associate, right? And so we have had experiences with some some durable goods where, we're helping them to think about, the information that they're putting on an in-store POS or on their package, right, to be able to explain, or on that retailer's website in a PDP, right? Like Scott's right now, we're working on some Amazon PDP work for Scott's Lawn Care, and going through like more tutorial type content and helping the user, the consumer, understand like how they can use it. So it's like trying to control that message as much as you possibly can from the brand all the way through down to the purchase, and not being so heavily reliant upon that in-store associate. But your self-checkout comment made me think about two very different experiences. And I don't know if this is just the two stores by me, but it always felt like going to Walgreens, there was never anybody there that was for you to check out. But when you went to CVS, they had somebody working there, and also like 3 empty checkout lanes, right? That you could go and scan your self-checkout lanes that you could scan yourself and get out of there. So it completely changed my experience and my affinity towards, Walgreens versus CVS, just because of that associate, or lack thereof, associate to help me make my purchase, just as simple as just scanning it and letting me leave. So it is, it's extremely important, and it's that shopping environment, and that, again, it's a human thing, and it's still brick and mortar is still king over e-commerce. But
yeah, I think you're right, and I think it also comes down to like it's like options, right? I think is the important thing. When I first started going to McDonald's and saw those, those tablets, I was like, how many buttons how many different customizations can I make to a Big Mac meal? I just want 2 cheeseburgers and a fries. Let me get out of here. It felt like more time to touch it, but then I think you get used to it. But
well, yeah, I mean, if you go there enough times, right, you figure out where the buttons are, just like the person who was running the cash register to begin with. But I didn't want to be trained to work at McDonald's. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But then almost like, oh, you got your app and you got your go-tos. You can just hit the button and then it's all, reorder. Or
reorder. That goes back to that goes back to your comment about agentic and what's in your fridge today. I just want it again. Just keep giving me the same things. I also think, during COVID, this personal anecdote, during COVID, I was ordering my groceries every week, Instacart. And prior to that, I actually liked going to the store, experience, like discovery. I'm more of the home cook. So for me, that was like enjoyment. But the behavior shift, I fell into it, Instacart ordering all the time. And it was like, I don't know, fairly recent that I started going back to the store, and the discovery is so much more fun, and brands are missing out on that when it's all, when it's just all e-commerce. It's very hard to get somebody to discover your product in an online environment. So, in store is really important, get out of shelf, get on that display. And for me, that was more enjoyable experience, is just walking the aisle versus clicking and searching, and which in most cases I was just click and reorder the same things.
Yeah, and also like trial, right? Like having, they we used to joke about, in college we used to go to Costco to get free lunch, because you could go to all the little stations and grab something. And, probably one of the most expensive sections at the grocery store is still the butcher. And the butcher, being able to tell you, hey, what's fresh, what's good, what do you got specials on, what's been marinating for how long, there's still some expertise, or at least some personal, customer care. I think that it goes into creating a great experience. Well, Erich, fascinating conversation. I always enjoy talking retail media. I think, it's such an important part of the value chain. And like every time somebody tells me retail is dead, it seems to, it's like surviving a nuclear winter. It comes back. It's, consumer behaviors are not linear in one direction. It's, I think, of anything that we have realized it goes in waves, and, for good reason, I think. So always fun to talk to somebody that has the level of expertise and depth that you do. If folks want to keep up with your thinking and or learn more about the agency, where would you like to send them?
bluechipww.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn at Erich Parker.
All right, let's go. And thanks, everybody. I hope you had a great week. If this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to subscribe or follow. If you're listening to the show, an honest review on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening on is how we find a larger audience organically. And last but not least, if there is a CPG marketer out there, somebody in retail media or a retail marketer, or more importantly, just somebody who you think would benefit from the show and the conversation that I had with Erich today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, have an amazing weekend. We will see you again on Monday with more episodes. Thanks.